Hello, I'm Catherine Gladwin, and I've been with the Prince George Hospice Society since 1998. In 2003, I became a Rainbows Registered Director with Rainbows Canada. We're here today to talk about children's grief, and this video series is Parents Helping Their Children Grieve. This is video number 1. When helping your child with their grief, it is important to know that you will grieve too. This is normal. Your own grief will show up. Practicing self-care is essential. You need to be healthy to have the capacity to listen to your children. It is important that you look after your own needs. Give yourself permission to express your own grief, and remember, everyone's grief is unique to them. There are some common and some different feelings. This is what makes grief unique. Each and every person grieves differently. Each and every flight that you get on, the announcement says, put your own mask on before you put on your child's. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. Self-compassion is empathy. Show yourself some understanding. Give yourself permission. You are allowed to have your feelings just as your child is allowed to have theirs. It doesn't change the outcome, but it will help you heal. All around us, we have societal beliefs. Simply put, they are wrong. Get over it. Pull up your bootstraps. Take 3 days off and return to work. You can get married again or have another baby. Can you imagine how this feels when you hear this? Get over it. How can we get over our love of our life? We can't. Take 3 days off and come to work. What do we do with those feelings? Put them in a box? Put the lid on and tuck them away? Pulling up your bootstraps. You can't pull up your bootstraps because some days you are just in survival mode. Grief is different for both ourselves and our children. Neither is right or wrong. We don't get back to normal. We are forever changed by the loss. Grief is not about getting rid of something. It is about honoring the person who died and honoring yourself. Everyone is different, so everyone will grieve differently. There is no time limit. Grief has no calendar. Here's this little grief thingy. Look at this. This is what your energy and emotions look like. A big jumbled mess. Because grief does not go in a straight line. It's running all around. It's all jumbled up. All of your thoughts, memories, and emotions. Acknowledge your grief. My daughter Alexa died 19 years ago this Christmas Eve. I acknowledge the grief or the feelings that I have, especially when John Bon Jovi comes on the radio, and I know she loved to listen to him. I wear my grief as a second skin because she is always with me. Grief never goes away. It just becomes less present. We don't get back to normal. And your children do not get back to normal. We're going to create a whole new normal. Often children model their parents' behavior, grandparents' behavior, or any adult. It's okay for children to see adults cry and feel sad, because that makes children less alone in their sadness. Let children see that it is okay to feel stuff. Two of the simplest forms of self-care are gratitude and intentions. Gratitude. It gets easier every day because just think about how many times we've stopped and said to ourselves, thank you. And intentions. Focus on intentions for something or somebody. Do something nice. Sometimes just smiling can reroute a person's whole day. Remember that each one of us is important and that we need to care for ourselves. Now you can join us in a conversation about taking care of ourselves so we can take care of our children.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about our own grief and how we've experienced the grief of our children. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, good morning, Faye. Thank you.
Good morning.
Before we introduce ourselves, let me go first and let you know who I am. My name's Faye, and I'm the Grief Support Coordinator at the Rotary Hospice House here in Prince George. And in my generation, when I was growing up, we were never asked what we felt as children about moving or how we handled the death of a pet. And I don't think my parents were, what is the word I want to use? I don't think they did that on purpose. It just, in my generation, that's just not what they did. And so when I was 52 and my mom died, my life changed so drastically, and I went into this grief spiral, and on so many levels, it took a long time for me to come out of that. And I didn't even know I was grieving. I didn't know what grief was or even what to do with it. So it started a journey on learning about grief, and that's how I got to the hospice house. Tell us about yourself, Melanie.
Hi, I'm Melanie, and what has brought me to hospice and on this grief journey is the death of my dad in 2019. He passed away on November the 12th, and it was the first death of a close family member that I experienced. My husband and I and our two daughters, who were 17 and 19 at the time, live across the street. We moved into the house across the street from the house that I grew up in. And so it was an idyllic extended family. And so it was really important to me to model grief well for my girls. Because they're older, they've already figured out a lot on their own, right? So that's what sort of started me on this journey of how can I move through this process in a healthy way that will show them how to walk through their own experience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Faye, for me, probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with was the loss of my firstborn granddaughter. She passed away on Mother's Day, 2019. I was totally shocked, wiped out. I don't think I could be here today without the support of the hospice house. We've done many things through some of the suggestions that you folks have made. One of the things we do to make sure we honor our granddaughter is we had a bench set up in Fort George Park in her memory, and we spend time there, and this is comforting to us. There are many, many things you can do. One of the things that happens in our lives when we lose someone is there are really no words to describe it. The main one I would say is empty. You have that empty feeling, and it's something we have to work with and get help. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you're here.
Well, thank you again for having us.
So grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind, whether that be death or divorce or moving. the loss of a pet. And some of the reactions and emotions that we feel are sadness and anger, perhaps feeling of relief or guilt, lots of exhaustion, that's for sure. And our society tells us quite plainly that it's uncomfortable with grief. We hear things like, if you are sad, it makes me uncomfortable, so please don't be sad around me anymore. You've grieved long enough. It's time to get over it. It's time to move on. Time heals all wounds. So why are you still so sad? After all, it's been like a year or 2 or 5. And children are so resilient. They don't really grieve. Have you heard any of these things or something similar?
Well, I have. I lost my nephew to cancer about 3 years ago, and my brother, who was his father, said to me, "You will never understand unless you lose someone." And I think that probably is foremost in my mind. This has happened to me, and I think you're right. People grieve in different ways. Sometimes, you get mad. You question yourself as to why did this happen. So, in order to move forward, we need to honor that person that we have lost. And we do this in many ways. As I said, we had this bench installed in the park. We have special dinners. We use some china that we had that was special to my granddaughter. We have special meals for her. We honor her on her birthday, and many things you can do. Sometimes you just have to do what you think on a spur of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Oh.
I'm grateful that I haven't personally heard those things said to me, but I'm aware that that's out there, and as a society, we are super uncomfortable with death and dying, and that I've noticed more of an absence of people inquiring even how you're doing, sort of thing. It's a non-starter. And so it's been really focused on giving grief space in our lives, kind of thing, and making room for it to be there. I actually purchased a blown glass globe that sits in my living room, kind of as a reminder that grief is with us. So I look at that ball, and that's my grief right there, and that sort of thing. So that's been my experience with people having those different feelings and opinions about grief. And the other thing that comes to mind is I have a history with depression and anxiety, and those are things that we always look to fix or cope with or change. And so the experience of grief has been quite novel in the sense of, I don't need to fix this. And in fact, there isn't anything that will fix this. I just need to sit with these feelings. And I had what we call a grief storm or whatever in the middle of the night. And it was just a matter of sitting there and being like, okay, these are just the waves. And I didn't have to fight the waves. I just had to sit and let them wash. And I knew that it would end. But just knowing that those feelings are so normal, and in feeling them is so important to moving through grief.
I think for me personally, my grief took me by such surprise because my mom and I had a tumultuous relationship. And actually a good friend said, well, I'm not sure why you're so sad because you didn't get along with your mom anyway. And I was so surprised by that and so hurt at the same time. I'm going, what? I loved my mom. But yeah, it was hard. But I was really taken by surprise, and how long that I struggled with the feelings of being a bad daughter because I didn't do enough in the relationship, and yet struggling with, well, she was a hard mom. But it's working through that and recognizing and allowing the grief to come, that now I can say, oh man, I loved her, And she was hard, but man, I loved her. So it's been really good that way.
Well, that's the whole thing of, you can hold those two things at the same time, right? Because my dad wasn't perfect. And, we had hurts and family issues and different things. But at the same time, that loss is no less real. And one of the things I found in a book that I really appreciated was every grief is different because every relationship is different. So even if you have two people who lost a parent, their grief is going to be different because they had different relationships with their parents. So
we do grieve so differently, don't we?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, we all agree on that.
Yeah, thank you. At one point in my life, I had a quote taped onto the bathroom mirror that I looked at every day. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who said it, and I can't find out who said it, but it reads, "Children's needs are best met by adults whose needs are met." And I'm wondering, what do you think of that quote? And when we start talking about self-care and the importance of taking care of ourselves when we're trying to help our children grieve, and what kind of strategies for self-care do you use?
Well, I feel that's a very good question, Faye. And when this happened to us, when we lost our granddaughter, we are now caring for two of her siblings. So you'll find that your priorities change rather drastically, and you have to find ways to put aside things that normally go on in your household, whether it's chores or whatever, to make sure that the other children are being looked after. So when you do that, then it becomes very much more important for you to make sure you're caring for yourself. So some of the things my wife and I do, it was one of the things we do go to the park. We spend time at the bench, as I had mentioned earlier. Sometimes now that the two younger ones are in school, we can now go out and have a coffee and have an adult conversation. It's kind of nice. So we do some of those things. The hospice house has been phenomenal, helping us as well. Just we know in our thoughts that they're there and they're available. We have spoken to some of our neighbors who sometimes just give us encouragement. So we reach out that way and make sure that you don't lose any of your friends that you have visited with the past, and explain to them, hey, we'll catch up to you for coffee as soon as we can. And most of those people are understanding it. You need that help.
Thanks, boss.
Yeah, I find that it's really important to take that time, and also to tell your kids you're taking that time, right? So if I'm having a rough day and I'm missing Dad, I'll be open. I'll be like, yeah, I'm missing Dad, or Opa, right now, or reaching out to hospice for support and grief support, getting connected there, finding resources, learning about grief. And so part of it has been looking after me is also, in a way, showing them how to look after themselves as well.
I struggled with looking after myself after my mom died because I didn't even know I was grieving. I didn't know what it was. That's the crazy part. And so I didn't take care of myself because I didn't know what I was doing. And so finally, after a whole year, then it was like, oh, I need help. And so then it was reaching out for help. And the more I felt better about what I was experiencing, the more I was able to help my family feel better. But that first year was just turmoil, and it was messy. It was messy.
Well, everything in your life changes so drastically when that happens. And if you have to continue on and go to work and do those things, then again, sometimes you're trying to focus on what you have to do throughout the day, be it if you're just driving the car. And you have to remember, when you need to grieve, you need to make yourself set aside somewhere where you're comfortable and talk to yourself, do self-talk. And that's very important.
Very important. I like getting my nails done too.
Yeah. Well, I actually, in our family, we sort of likened the death and the grief that follows is like moving to a new country where we don't speak the language and we don't know the customs. And so even the basic tasks take more effort, energy, and intention. And so you kind of realize, like, if you'd move to a new country, you're like, yeah, I need some extra decompression time that you know, normally would have had in regular old life. And so that is one thing that's been also helpful in communicating our experience in our family too, to have that metaphor.
That's a really good example, Melanie. One of the things we do is the grandchildren, and in the middle of the summer, we will watch one of our granddaughter's favorite Christmas movies, and we'll allow the children to dress in their onesies, and we'll relax and do things like that, and we'll have hot chocolate. Those things help as well. Yeah.
That's absolutely lovely.
Yeah, it is lovely. So I think the bottom line today is that we've learned that we all grieve differently, different ways, and that to have the physical and emotional energy it takes to help our children grieve, it's so important to take care of ourselves. So thank you so much for today, and
thank you, Faye.
Thanks, Faye.